Welcome to FrogTalks. Hi, welcome to FrogTalks at BB King's. I'm Ashley Connors. I'm the head of strategy at StrawberryFrog.
And I am Tyler D'Angelo, the head of creative at StrawberryFrog.
Yeah.
We are StrawberryFrog is
we
the
this.
except down the teeth. StrawberryFrog is one of the first and only cultural movement agencies.
Yeah, so we're super excited to be here at Ad Week in the coolest venue of all. I mean, we get to be in a bar. I wish we had a rock concert for you or something. But we have something equally exciting. We're here to talk about cultural movements and why they're one of the most powerful forces of change.
I think what we talk about at the agency, and I think it's really important, is that no other time that I can remember is that this country has been divided and also more driven by the passions that people have. And what we do at the agency is we connect brands to those movements.
Yeah, so we have a little animation, a 60-second animation to play to give you a little taste of what a cultural movement is.
It's one of those 30 buttons on it.
Well, I'm pressing next. Oh, there we go.
Anyone can build a brand and change the world. No, seriously. All it takes is one person to make one idea happen in one corner of our hyper-connected world, and an entire global cultural movement is ready to go by the next time zone's sunrise. In fact, it's happening right now. Culture is changing as we speak, in ways that you might not even notice until, bam, it's changed. Look around you. Most likely, all you see is the past. Brands yelling at the world. It's a dancing chicken, look at me! But ideas can be more than just temporary, and brands can be more than just one campaign from obscurity. When you have a movement, all of a sudden we're not just asking to be noticed. We're deciding to be part of something. We're igniting passion. We're revolutionizing hope. We once again think different. And brands need that, more than ever. Because when you connect people together around what they deeply believe in, it's a powerful thing. It won't just change a brand. It will change things for good. StrawberryFrog. Cultural movement makers.
So that gives you a little taste about what we do. And as you can see, we have 4 lovely guests here. They have created movements, and they're leading movements taking on some of the most important issues in our world. So from financial insecurity to environmental issues to ending relationship abuse and using social media to live the dream. So I'd now love to invite Katie Hood up to come and speak about the One Love Foundation.
Thank you.
Great.
Sorry. Okay. I'm pressing it. Oh, here we go. Okay, sorry.
It's a little...
So I'm Katie Hood. I'm the CEO of One Love. I'm happy to be here. We are working to build a movement to end relationship abuse. Domestic violence and relationship abuse are an issue that, quite frankly, too many of us are not really paying that much attention to. But looking at the statistics, it's a public health epidemic. And to handle it, we're really all going to have to start paying attention. And this movement is about waking people up and then engaging them in action. So I'm having trouble with this clicker. Okay, so I have slides, but the clicker does not seem to be working. So we started after a girl named Yardley Love was killed by her boyfriend at the University of Virginia in 2010. I'm not sure how many of you remember her story. Thank you. And the next slide. Thank you. I'm not sure how many of you remember her story, but it grabbed media attention because she defied our expectation of who this happened to. She was a young Division I college athlete. The world was in front of her. She was 3 weeks from graduation. And then she was dead. Her family was in shock. I know because I'm a friend of her family. So I was literally there day one when they got the news that her ex-boyfriend had broken down the door and beaten her to death. And when I tell you that they really had no idea that she was at risk, I can assure you I'm telling you the truth. She was too strong, too happy. She had friends. She sort of defied their expectations of who this could happen to. Can I ask you to help me with that since I'm clearly inept?
And maybe we can get a new one if somebody back there is listening.
So long story short, they actually avoided the issue of relationship abuse for a while. They could not imagine their daughter had been in such a relationship. But they started to learn the statistics, and they realized how incredibly prevalent this issue is. So 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will be in an abusive relationship in their lifetime. 3 women a day in the U.S. will be killed by their partners. And young women ages 16 to 24 are at 3 times greater risk for being in an abusive relationship than any other demographic, and research shows that they have no idea about this. So as they started to learn more about Yardley's relationship and what relationship violence really is, they learned that actually she had been in an abusive relationship. There had been plenty of warning signs, and when people came up at the trial to say, we saw this, we heard this, they realized that if anyone in her life, including Yardley, had understood the signs of an unhealthy and increasingly dangerous, emotionally abusive relationship, that steps could have been taken to save her life. So their focus really shifted, and they said, if Yardley's death was 100% avoidable, not 10% avoidable, not 50% avoidable, if information could have meant that Yardley was alive today, how do we make sure that other young people get access to the information that Yardley didn't have? And that was a really defining moment. They decided they were going to talk to young people. The goal was prevention, and the goal was education to get ahead of it. And at that point, they were not yet talking about movement. If you go to the next slide, the real big idea was young people don't learn the way we used to learn. Not to say I'm older than many of you, but they're learning differently now, and we need to speak to them in a different way using formats they like. So content is a really critical part of our strategy, as well as language. So on the left, you'll see we create film-based content that really personalizes this issue for people. All of a sudden, instead of talking about something that happens to someone else somewhere else, they're saying, oh my gosh, this is my life. 97% of kids who participate in our content say they want their friends to consume it too, because they see these things all the time and they never understood what they were before. So there's a clear information gap. The second thing, thank you, is language. So Yardley didn't call what she was in domestic violence. That wasn't what she saw. She saw drama. She saw dysfunction. She was glad to be breaking up and getting on with her life. So the family immediately started talking about relationship abuse instead to, again, speak in a language kids could hear. And ultimately, we've actually shifted even further, because as we've brought our content to young people across the nation, what we see is they don't want to talk about abuse and violence at all. And quite honestly, who in this room really does? What they do want to talk about is healthy and unhealthy relationships. And so today, the way that we talk to them, which by the way is also in a very no-judgment tone, because 100% of the people in this room will be in an unhealthy relationship in your life, and 100% of you will do unhealthy things, including myself. So we all benefit from understanding better how to be healthy. So in listening to them and showing them content that personalizes the issue and speaking to them in a language that they could hear, all of a sudden we're meeting them where they are and filling this information gap. And this, I'll go through really quickly. This is a commitment curve. If you're in and this we came up with later. So why is this working? Why are kids not only excited about our content and then wanting to participate? And this framework really shows how you get people from knowing nothing about your issue to understanding your issue, to caring about your issue, to internalizing the change that you want to see. And if you look here, most nonprofits get stuck at awareness building. When people say to me, oh, you're raising awareness about relationship abuse, that's so great, I'm like, no. Like, if we want to get to change, this is never going to be enough. But what our content was really doing was immediately, in 38 minutes for our core film escalation, and then in these social media campaigns in 30 seconds or 3 minutes, increasing understanding, making it personal, and then getting people to want to participate. And you see that that's the slope of the curve where change starts to happen. So what we're obsessed with at One Love is how do we move people up that curve. So what we've learned. So it is the combination of digital and face-to-face. Digital campaigns are incredibly powerful. Our That's Not Love campaign has engaged with 60+ million people in a really short time. The conversation that happens online is incredibly powerful. But when we gather people face-to-face, and these are pictures of various One Love gatherings around the country, something else happens. This generation is so digitally connected, they're not as used to interacting face-to-face. But interacting face-to-face is deeply human. And so when they get face-to-face and they talk about hard things that they all can relate to, it's very empowering. So when we think about what we've learned, that it's really that these conversations matter. Bringing people together, helping them find community matters. And when we think about why this is working and where we go from here, we've gone beyond education. So education, we're doing a ton of education. 150,000 people have done our core program. We want to make that 1 million in the next year. But the content plus conversation plus community is what we think is going to get us up that curve and ultimately get us to the movement that we think is so needed. So the if onlys that Yardley's family had at the beginning, if only she hadn't been in that room that night, or if only she understood the signs of an unhealthy relationship, have turned into a big what if. And it is what if changing the statistics around relationship abuse is as simple as educating every young person in this country about how to have healthy relationships and engaging them in a movement to love better. And that's the movement that we're all about. So if you're interested, go to our website, joinonelove.org. We'd love to have you involved. Thank you.
And for our next speaker, it's like my huge pleasure to introduce Holly Watson, who's not only become a very good friend, but is also our client, which is SunTrust Bank. And she's going to be speaking to you about building confidence with the On-Up movement.
Okay, did you all just stifle a yawn because he said, I work for a bank? And then, or you may have thought, oh my gosh, I don't trust her, so whatever she's going to say, I don't really trust banks. And then if I said the word finances, you might groan. And then if I even took it a step further and said, are you financially confident? You might feel a little uncomfortable. Well, if people don't trust banks and nobody wants to talk about finances because it's taboo, how in the world would a bank lead a movement to drive people from financial stress to confidence? Well, at SunTrust, we did that by defining our purpose. And, you know, we know as humans, we all need a purpose. What gets us out of bed every morning? What drives us? What guides the decisions we make? Well, guess what? A bank needs a purpose, too. Because people don't trust banks. It's just a simple fact. And we were doing a lot of research and understood that people also are extremely stressed about their finances, but they're not talking about it. So there was this opportunity for SunTrust to really change the conversation about money. And so our CEO declared that our purpose was going to be to light the way to financial well-being for all Americans. And it's a big, lofty goal, but the way he did it is we started internally by literally changing the way we do business. For example, our mortgage group, if you come in and you don't qualify for a home loan, we don't just kick you out the door. We have partnered with Operation Hope, who will help you build up your credit score and hopefully qualify for that loan. We even have Operation Hope in some of our branches. So purpose sounds lofty, and it's your North Star, and a lot of people say, well, how do you activate on that? Well, the brilliant thing that SunTrust did was start with our teammates. So we found out that even our teammates are affected by this. Just because you work for a bank doesn't mean that you have your finances in order or that you're financially confident. So the bank gave financial literacy classes for teammates to take and even had a monetary incentive for them to help build a savings account up. And then after they did that, they appointed purpose ambassadors. And these are people who volunteer from all levels of the company, and they go out into the community and teach others what they've learned about their finances. That went extremely well, and it wasn't until we got to that point that we said, we've got to make this bigger. Now we want to go external. And the first thing we did was really kind of look at the statistics, and they're staggering. When you're saying 50% of Americans don't have $2,000 in an emergency savings account, that's pretty terrifying. And that 65% of people say what keeps them up at night is money. So we knew what our purpose was, and we thought that it was time to launch a movement with the help of our great friends at StrawberryFrog. So we launched the On Up movement. This is a movement to financial confidence. And what do we mean by that? We are encouraging people to save at least $2,000 in an emergency savings fund, to demystify finances, and to really understand what are your values, what are you saving for? It might be different for every single one of you in this room. So we launched this movement, and the heartbeat of this movement is onup.com. onup.com sells nothing. And it is available for anyone. You do not have to be a SunTrust client. You go there and you can get financial tips and tools and learn, a little bit about yourself and, what you need to do to take that first step. But we wanted to spread this message further. So we launched it brilliantly with StrawberryFrog with an absolutely beautiful spot in the 2016 Super Bowl. And that was a big risk because we were sending people to onup.com, not to buy products. And, you know, bankers don't like risk. But they were really excited during the Super Bowl. We literally had 30,000 people come to the website during the game, and 10,000 people join that night. So I think that bolstered our confidence, and we said, okay, let's keep this going on. But we wanted to spread the message further. Well, now all of our brand advertising goes to onup.com. We're selling nothing with all of that money that all the media that we're purchasing out there. So that's another risk, but you know, we see it as opportunity. Also, you might have heard a little ballpark that we just opened up in Atlanta, and we thought this was a great way to really connect to people in the heart of our community and teach them about their finances. So we did a first for the bank. We opened up a retail spot that sells nothing. We don't even have an ATM in it. It's called the OnUp Experience. So you can go in, you can learn a little bit about your finances and have some fun along the way. We also took OnUp on tour. We've gone to 65 different stops, encouraging people to join the movement, teaching them about their finances, but doing it fun. You can have virtual reality of SunTrust Park and play some baseball games. And we were also thanking teammates for helping us launch this movement. And then finally, I'm really excited to say that later this year, you're going to see the OnUp Challenge. This is a gamified financial literacy course that allows you, based on your values, to go through steps of financial confidence. So what is your personal journey? And just in conclusion, you can be a purpose-driven brand and still make money. So far, we've had 2.2 million people join this movement in less than 2 years. And our brand consideration is up. We went from 2015, 10th out of 33 banks, to 4th. And that's huge for SunTrust because the only guys in front of us are the big guys with the deep pockets that have national footprint. So it is driving business. Our revenue is up 7% since last year. So just I think the message is you can have a movement and still make money, which is important to bankers, I can tell you that. So if you want to go join the movement, go to onup.com.
To be able to talk about these movements, these hugely impactful movements in 7 minutes is no easy feat. And with a broken clicker, so Katie, apologies at first. And hopefully you're getting the theme. We call this FrogTalks because we've designed it because we have no attention spans anymore. I think that just this past last year, or maybe in the last 18 months, it's out that we actually have less of an attention span than goldfish, which is pretty sad, right? So hopefully we're keeping your attention. We're going to bring up Marshall Brown now to talk about what beer and saving the planet have in common.
Hi, thank you very much. Let's see if we can get this thing going here. Let me first explain Save the Great South Bay. We were formed some 5 years ago at my 35th high school reunion. My family just moved back to Long Island, where we're from, to raise a family, and along came the reunion. I went back to my hometown, which is Sayville on the South Shore. I walked to the end of the street I grew up on with my then 11-year-old son. We hopped in the water, and it was disgusting, coffee-colored, what had happened. So that's all we could talk about at the reunion that night was how we needed to save the Great South Bay. So the very next day, we got the URL. We established the Facebook group. Well, along came Sandy 12 weeks later, almost to the day, and that really exposed how vulnerable we were. Let's see, click. There we go. And that brings us to the question, can a beer save the bay? First, let me describe to you the problem with the bay. There it is. That's the annual shellfish landings over the decades, and you'll see a precipitous drop. Well, in 1985, a massive brown tide obscured the bay bottom, causing all the eelgrass to die off. That was the habitat for the clams and the fish. This bay produced half of all the hard-shell clams eaten in this country for generations. From one year to the next, 6,000 people lost their livelihoods, and we lost a way of life. Well, why did that happen? Well, there's the problem, really. Massive algal blooms of all sorts in the Great South Bay. We're really good at the brown tide. You got the rust tide out in the Peconic Bay. You got blue-green algae in our ponds. You got red tide, which is toxic, and the blue zones indicate where there's not enough oxygen for the fish. Why is this happening? This is the biggest environmental crisis you've never heard about. There are 500,000 cesspools and septic tanks sitting in sandy soil on Long Island. That nitrogen is going one of two places. It's going into our drinking water, which is a sole source aquifer left by the glaciers, or it's going into our ponds, our rivers, and then eventually our bays. That's basically fertilizer for these algal blooms. And if we do nothing, we will lose all our marshes, all our fisheries, and all our bays by 2030. That's what we're looking at. So what you see this gentleman doing here, however, he is installing an on-site denitrification system as a pilot. This year, Suffolk County will be rolling out 200. Next year, another 200. We need to roll out a couple 100,000 at 17,000 a pop plus maintenance. So it's a huge thing. But the cost of doing nothing is so much greater. So it's very overwhelming. So what does Save the Great South Bay do in order to address this issue? Well, we have three programs. We have the Creek Defender program. There's 42 creeks that flow into the Great South Bay along the South Shore, along these 30 villages that traditionally were connected to the bay. Here's one group in Babylon on Earth Day. Out of the 10 that we had, in 2.5 hours, they pulled out 28 car tires, 2 shopping carts, and between all 8 groups, it was an enormous amount of trash. In the past 2 weeks, we now have Amityville, Lindenhurst, Bayport, Patchogue, and a couple other towns ready to become good local stewards of their waters. In a group of 12,000 people now, over the last 5 years, we've had fewer political food fights than I can count on one hand. Why? We all care about where we're from. The Bay doesn't know any politics. Here's another campaign that we've helped launch. It's the I Love Long Island campaign. If you go to ilovelongisland.org, we have some 30 organizations there. This is about creating awareness. How do I have a bay-friendly, eco-friendly lawn? What sort of practices do I need to engage in? Certainly, we shouldn't be throwing pesticides on our lawns, nor should we be putting in chemical high nitrogen fertilizers. A good rain, and then we're back in the soup. Here's my favorite. Shellfish restoration. A single oyster can filter 30 gallons of water a day. What could a million oysters do? What could a billion oysters do? They have the Billion Oyster Project in New York Harbor, for instance, for this very purpose, to clean the harbor. Well, out where I'm from, the water's still clean enough where if you grow the oysters, you can also sell them. So the nice thing here is for every acre of oysters, that's $100,000 revenue. We can open up 5,000 acres to oystering and have a $500 million industry again, and, according to a noted scientist, take care of 147% of the nitrogen problem in the bay. Well, how are we going to all fund that? Well, there you go. Drink the Bay Clean. That helps to fund each of these 3 programs. The reason this happened was because the founder and brewmaster emeritus of Blue Point Brewery happened to go to my high school. So sitting down with the meeting, he said, before we get started, I'm going to make you your beer. He knew for years that that's what we wanted. It's a very complex process to put together all these vendor relations so that it makes sense for everybody. Well, the good news is this is going to be a national beer, if not further. There's bays everywhere. And the message that we're trying to bring is you can have conscious consumerism around this. You can make a difference in the choices you make. And we hope that this is not the last place where InBev decides to brew a brew for a local cause. With that, thank you very much.
So as you can kind of see, is these movements that we've seen so far are really important because of the social change that they tackle, and there's great meaning behind them, and there's positive change that they are meant to create. But there's not all movements. I think have to have are not all about the same kind of subject of creating positive social change in the same way that the first three have. There's also levity to movements. They also could be fun. They can be an insight into culture that isn't necessarily about a social change we want to move from, but one that we just want to recognize. And there's no better person to be able to talk to you about this next cultural movement than my friend Jeff Minton, one of the best photographers and someone I've had the great pleasure of not only working with but working aside. And he's going to introduce this next movement.
Cool. Please. He brought a case of beer, and I pretty much drank the whole thing backstage. So just see if I can get through this. No, just kidding. So, which one? Green machine. So, is this the dream? I don't know what is this? Like, what's happening here, right? So I just the three of us and the dog had just finished an Insta breakfast, which is not an instant breakfast. It's a breakfast made for a good Instagram post. And he taught me that if you sprinkle turmeric on the egg yolks, it actually makes the colors really pop, which I thought was pretty interesting. So after that, it was time for the two of them to go to work. And this was a particularly stressful morning, and he was getting kind of frustrated because of the angles too low, and her pose wasn't natural. I don't know if that reads, and the dog was being an asshole, doing its own thing, and he couldn't see inside the van to the most important part, which is the alliances. So I'll back up a sec. This spring I got a call from the New Yorker for an assignment to photograph this kind of movement lifestyle they're calling van life, and more specifically follow this lovely couple around the coast of California, documenting their lives as professional van lifers. So when I used to see these vans, back in the day, you'd think, oh, there's some odd people in there, in a cool way, maybe a little bit hippie-ish. They hadn't showered in a while. Maybe some dude in the back is still into conspiracies. But now you kind of see them come down the road, and it's usually like a couple, and the van is dialed in. I think it's just running tight. It's all organized. There's a spot for yoga mats. There's a spot for reusable whole food bags, and they're set up, and everything's just healthy. There's not even any drugs in there anymore. So it's interesting. So where are they going? And for these two, the answer is that they're on a permanent road trip. So they've been on the road for 4 years. So it's pretty cool, and I'm sure you thought of the idea, but it's kind of a romantic one, just bailing on the 9-to-5 and heading out on the off the grid and just keeping life in the rearview mirror. So the question is this even possible? With all the technology, there's more technology in the van than there is in their apartment, probably. So the question is that are they living? Are they living the experience, being out there, or are they there to, share the experience with everyone? So they, then they start blogging and Insta bragging and just carpet bombing the social media, and they start, they get more and more popular, and documenting this beautiful way of life. So this is the photo that actually ran the New Yorker that I shot. But I asked Corey here, I'm like, what makes a popular post? What's getting the most likes? And he's like, well, it's usually pictures, of Emily in a bikini, or the van, or sun flare, the beach, and other photos of Emily not wearing too much clothes, and So I say, okay. So my concept is to take every element from all their most popular posts and try to combine it into one shot, and that would kind of be the wink, this visual over stimulation. But I don't know if it worked. I think they just got a lot more followers. So the interesting thing for them is that they're in this kind of spot. I think they have 187,000 followers, which I learned is some people call their micro-influencers. So and the interesting thing is that they have, the micro-influencers, and they have, it's really, and they're also niche-specific hashtag van lifers, and that's really interesting for advertisers because they know exactly who their audience is, and so they started getting sponsors like a company that makes a toothpaste that's clay-based, and another one that's like an organic clothing company, and a tea it's an instant coffee that has mushrooms in it. Not that kind of mushroom, but exotic mushrooms. And then they started landing bigger ones like kettle chips and Hydro Flask. So anyway, they have 10 sponsors now, and they're I was going to say next slide. 10 sponsors now. Oh, so how's that Hydro Flask looking there? Pretty tight, huh? But in all honesty, they work hard. It's not easy. She's just constantly on the computer. This is their living, so she's dealing with all these sponsors and trying to get new ones, and they're just we need new content, and she's editing photos, and there's these little orange hard drives that are everywhere. So it's pretty cool, and he's doing the itinerary and pimping out the van constantly. That's I think his part, and what's going to be the next great photo, and there's a lot of stress in trying to look like you're having a good time. So anyway, that's it. Go back to the beginning. Well, I was going to go back to that first slide, but the question is, are they living the dream? I kind of think so. And the good news is for all of us, we can do this too. You just go out, you get a van, and you line up some sponsors, some alliances they call them. And you could free up an endless amount of time, and the dude's got to grow an awesome beard, and if you're a girl, you got to wear a bikini all the time. So, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. I don't know how many people are going to quit their jobs here and go live in a van. But that's what we do at Strawberry Frog. Hopefully you guys got a taste of what a movement is and how it is a force for change and how you can get involved. You've seen everything from the most taboo issue in the world of financial insecurity all the way to something as crazy and silly as van life. It's really about activating people's passions. And we believe that there is no issue in the world that a movement can't take on and that a movement can't ignite a group of people to work together to create change. So that's Strawberry Frog. This is FrogTalks. We'll be around, in the back if you guys have any questions or if you want to chat. But we thank BB Kings for having us and AdWeek, and of course all of our great speakers for joining us and for all the work you do in the world. So thank you.